On a Tuesday morning in March, a dark red Toyota Camry with 112,000 miles pulled into my bay, and the owner did not even make it through the door before he started talking. He said the transmission had been slipping for 3 weeks. A dealership had already told him the transmission needed to be rebuilt. The estimate was in his glove box, $4,200. He handed it to me like a verdict. I drove it around the block. I pulled codes. I asked him one question. "Do you tow anything?" He said no. Second question. "When did you last change the transmission fluid?" There was a long pause. He said it was a Toyota. He thought those never needed service. 45 minutes later, I handed his keys back. Fresh fluid, a reset, a short relearn drive. The slipping was gone. He stood in the parking lot staring at an invoice for less than $200, genuinely confused about how close he had come to paying $4,200 unnecessarily. That moment right there is why this video exists. Because Toyota automatic transmissions are genuinely excellent pieces of engineering. They are designed to last. The problem is not that they are fragile. The problem is that drivers unknowingly destroy them through habits so common, so widely accepted, that nobody ever questions them. And because Toyotas are so forgiving, the damage accumulates quietly, invisibly, for months or years before it ever surfaces as a symptom. By the time you feel something wrong, the transmission has already been suffering. I have been working on cars for over 2 decades, and I can tell you without hesitation that Toyota automatics account for some of the most preventable transmission failures I have ever seen. Not because the transmissions are weak, because the owners were never told the truth. Today I am going through 10 specific mistakes that destroy Toyota automatic transmissions. Real mistakes, backed by real behavior, with real consequences that show up in my shop on a regular basis. Some of these will surprise you. One of them in particular, number 3, is something almost every Toyota owner does without realizing it is quietly accelerating wear inside the valve body every single day. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to stop doing, exactly why it matters at a mechanical level, and exactly how these habits create the kind of internal damage that turns a $200 service into a $4,000 rebuild. Let us start from the beginning. Mistake number 1, never changing the transmission fluid. This one sounds obvious, but the damage it causes is not obvious at all. In fact, it is deeply misunderstood, even by people who consider themselves reasonably informed about car maintenance. Toyota has, at various points, listed certain transmissions as having lifetime fluid. That phrase is the most expensive piece of marketing language in the history of automotive ownership. What it actually means is that the fluid will outlast the warranty period. What it does not mean is that the fluid will protect the transmission for the life of the vehicle. Automatic transmission fluid does not just lubricate, it cools, it actuates. The hydraulic pressure that moves clutch packs, controls shift timing, and locks the torque converter is generated entirely by fluid. When that fluid degrades, it loses viscosity, it oxidizes, it becomes contaminated with microscopic metal particles shed during normal friction plate wear. And then it circulates through every hydraulic circuit in the transmission, carrying those particles with it, slowly depositing them in passages, solenoids, and valve bodies designed for tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. The transmission does not fail immediately. That is the trap. It compensates. Shift quality becomes slightly firmer. The torque converter lockup becomes slightly inconsistent. The transmission control module adjusts line pressure, trying to maintain smooth operation. Drivers feel nothing unusual for months, sometimes years. Then, one day, a solenoid sticks, a clutch pack overheats, and the estimate arrives. For most Toyota automatics, Fluid should be inspected and typically changed between 40 and 60,000 miles under normal driving conditions. If you tow, drive in mountainous terrain, or sit in stop and go traffic frequently, that interval drops significantly. Mistake number 2. Shifting into park before the car fully stops. This one happens at low speed, so it feels harmless. It is not. When you shift into park while the vehicle is still moving, even crawling at 2 or 3 miles per hour, the parking pal engages before the transmission has fully stopped rotating. The parking pal is a small, hardened metal pin that literally locks the output shaft of the transmission. It is not designed to absorb kinetic energy. It is designed to hold a stationary vehicle on a slope. Every time the parking pal absorbs a moving load, it experiences stress it was not engineered to handle. In Toyotas with higher mileage, the pal and the pal gear can develop wear ridges. The transmission may begin to feel like it clunks heavily into park. Eventually, the pal itself can chip, crack, or break, and a broken parking pal is an internal transmission repair. The fix is free. Stop completely, then shift into park. Mistake number 3. Using the wrong transmission fluid. This is the one. This is the mistake that generates more unnecessary transmission damage in Toyota vehicles than almost anything else on this list, and it happens constantly. Toyota engineers its automatic transmissions, particularly models with 6-speed, 8-speed, and continuously variable variants, to operate within very specific fluid parameters. These are not arbitrary preferences. The friction coefficient of the fluid directly affects how the clutch packs engage. The viscosity index affects how the hydraulic circuits respond at cold start versus operating temperature. The additive package determines how the torque converter clutch behaves during lockup. Toyota developed its own fluid specification, Toyota ATFWS, later updated to ATF Type TIV, and to specific continuously variable transmission fluids, for exactly this reason. These are not marketing exercises, they are engineering requirements. Here is where it goes wrong. A driver brings their Toyota to a quick lube shop or an independent garage. The shop does not stock Toyota-specific fluid. They substitute a generic Dexron-style fluid or a universal automatic transmission fluid. The price looks similar. The bottle says compatible with most Asian vehicles. The service gets completed, and the driver leaves thinking everything is fine. For a while, it is fine. The fluid flows, the transmission shifts. Nothing catastrophic happens immediately. But over time, the friction modifier chemistry in generic fluids does not match what Toyota clutch pack material is designed to work with. The engagement feel changes subtly. The torque converter clutch begins to shudder microscopically during lockup. The transmission control module sees inconsistent behavior and adjusts line pressure to compensate. The clutch packs run slightly hotter than designed because the fluid thermal properties do not match the engineering spec. 6 months later, the driver notices a faint vibration at highway speeds. The shop diagnoses the torque converter. The estimate is $1,200. The actual cause was a fluid change that cost $40. Always use Toyota-specified fluid. Use WS where specified, use continuously variable transmission fluid where specified, and use Type TIV where specified. If a shop cannot confirm they are using the correct Toyota fluid, go somewhere else. It is that simple and that important. Mistake number 4. Ignoring the transmission temperature warning. Modern Toyotas with towing capacity, including Tundra, Tacoma, 4Runner, Sequoia, and Highlander models, often have a transmission temperature gauge or warning indicator. A surprising number of drivers have never looked at it. Automatic transmission fluid begins to break down at sustained temperatures above 250 degrees Fahrenheit. At 300 degrees Fahrenheit, the breakdown accelerates dramatically. The fluid loses its viscosity, oxidizes, and begins to varnish internal surfaces. Clutch pack materials start to glaze. The friction coefficient drops. The transmission loses its ability to hold proper hydraulic pressure. When towing near capacity, especially on grades, transmission temperature can spike rapidly. Drivers focused on engine temperature often miss it entirely. If the transmission temperature warning activates, pull over. Let the system cool with the engine running and the transmission in neutral. Continuing to drive through an overheat event compresses weeks or months of normal fluid degradation into minutes. Adding an aftermarket transmission temperature gauge and an auxiliary cooler to high-use Toyota trucks is not an upgrade. It is insurance. Mistake number 5. Rocking the vehicle when stuck. Stuck in mud, snow, or sand, the natural instinct is to rock. Forward, reverse, building momentum to escape. In a Jeep from the 80s, this is inconsequential. In a modern Toyota with an electronically controlled automatic transmission, it is mechanically costly. Rapid alternating shifts between drive and reverse while the drivetrain is under load create torque reversals. The transmission is not designed to absorb those reversals at that frequency. The clutch packs engage in one direction, the planetary gears absorb load, then everything immediately reverses before the components have fully settled. Internal seals flex. Clutch material heats unevenly. The valve body processes signals it was never calibrated to handle in rapid sequence. A few recovery attempts will not destroy a transmission, but repeated rocking events over the life of the vehicle accumulate damage. If your Toyota spends time off-road or in winter conditions, learn proper recovery technique. Use traction boards, air down tires, ask for help. The transmission rebuild bill is always more expensive than the recovery equipment. Mistake number 6. Downshifting manually at high speed. Toyotas with paddle shifters or sequential manual mode give drivers direct control over gear selection. That control is genuinely useful at the right moments, particularly for engine braking on descents or overtaking maneuvers. It becomes destructive when used incorrectly. Forcing a downshift from 6th to 3rd at highway speeds does not just increase engine braking. It forces the transmission to match engine revolutions across a gap. The system was not designed to close that aggressively. The torque converter absorbs some of the shock, and the planetary gear set absorbs the rest. Done occasionally, the transmission handles it. Done habitually, it creates stress concentrations in gear teeth, accelerates thrust washer wear, and can damage the internal sealing rings that maintain hydraulic pressure between the planetary stages. Engine braking is legitimate. Sequential downshifts are legitimate. The key is sequencing, one gear at a time, with brief pauses at appropriate speed ranges. The transmission manual for your specific Toyota model lists the maximum speed for each gear range. Those numbers are not suggestions. Mistake number 7. Neglecting the transmission filter. Not all Toyota automatics use a traditional serviceable filter. Some use a screen, some use a filter integrated into the pan, and some use internal filtration that is accessed only during a rebuild. But on models where the filter is accessible and serviceable, neglecting it has consequences almost as serious as neglecting the fluid itself. The filter's job is to prevent metal particles, clutch material debris, and varnish flakes from recirculating through the hydraulic system. When it becomes saturated, flow restriction increases. The transmission pump has to work harder to maintain line pressure. In some cases, the filter bypass valve opens to maintain flow, and debris that should have been trapped now circulates freely. Drivers often notice the filter is overdue not because of a warning light, but because shifts become sluggish, particularly when cold. The transmission takes longer than usual to engage drive or reverse after sitting overnight. These are early hydraulic restriction symptoms. The filter is cheap. The labor to access it during a pan drop service is minimal. It belongs on the same service schedule as the fluid. Mistake number 8. Running low on fluid without realizing it. Unlike engine oil, transmission fluid does not burn off in normal operation. If your fluid level is low, there is a leak. A transmission running low on fluid causes problems faster than almost any other condition on this list. Line pressure depends on fluid volume. The pump can only pressurize what is available. When fluid level drops, pressure drops. Clutch packs that require a certain pressure threshold to fully engage begin to slip microscopically. That slipping generates heat. Heat degrades the remaining fluid faster, and the clutch material wears faster than it should. Transmission leaks in Toyotas commonly originate at the front or rear output shaft, seals, the pan gasket, the cooler line fittings, or the torque converter seal. Most of these are relatively inexpensive to address when caught early. When ignored, the leak continues and the fluid level drops further. What started as a $50 seal replacement can become a transmission rebuild because the clutch packs were cooked dry. Check your transmission fluid level at the intervals in your owner's manual. If your transmission does not have a traditional dipstick, which some newer Toyotas do not, have a shop check it at each oil change. A small leak caught early is nothing. A small leak ignored for 20,000 miles can be everything. Mistake number 9. Skipping the warm-up period in cold weather. Modern Toyotas will start and drive immediately in cold weather. The engine management system compensates. The transmission control module adjusts. Nothing prevents you from driving away. That capability is not the same as it being good for the transmission. Automatic transmission fluid thickens at low temperatures. In extreme cold, the difference between cold and fully warmed fluid viscosity is dramatic. A transmission operating with cold fluid has higher flow resistance, slower hydraulic response, and less effective lubrication in the bearings, bushings, and thrust washers that support the planetary gear sets. The first 2 to 3 minutes of driving in temperatures below 20 degrees Fahrenheit represent a disproportionate percentage of total transmission wear across the vehicle's lifetime. Not because anything breaks in those minutes, but because the fluid film maintaining the microscopic clearances inside the transmission is not yet fully established. The solution is not sitting and idling for 20 minutes. That wastes fuel and does not load the transmission properly for warm-up. The solution is driving gently at light throttle for the first several minutes in cold weather. Keep vehicle speed moderate, avoid aggressive acceleration, and let the fluid temperature rise naturally under light load before making any performance demands. Mistake number 10. Ignoring shift quality changes. This is the mistake that sits behind all the others. It is the reason a $40 fluid change becomes a $4,000 rebuild. It is the reason that Camry sat in my bay with a dealership estimate while the owner genuinely had no idea the problem had been developing for 18 months. Toyota automatic transmissions communicate. Not with words, obviously, but with behavior. Shift quality is not supposed to vary. When shifts become firmer than usual, that is information. When the transmission hesitates briefly before engaging drive in the morning, that is information. When there is an occasional soft thud during upshifts at highway speed, that is information. When fuel economy drops without obvious cause, that is information. When the engine revs slightly higher than usual before the transmission upshifts, that is information. None of these symptoms are emergencies on day one. Every single one of them is the transmission signaling that something is changing internally. Fluid condition, hydraulic pressure, clutch pack wear, solenoid behavior, torque converter function. These symptoms are diagnostic gifts. They are telling you that a $200 intervention right now will prevent a $4,000 intervention later. Most drivers dismiss them. The car still drives. Nothing has stopped working. They assume it has always felt this way or that it is just how the car drives now. And months pass, and the symptoms worsen slightly. And then one day, the transmission slips hard enough that it cannot be ignored. And by then, the clutch packs are already compromised. Pay attention to shift quality. Know your baseline. Any deviation deserves investigation, not panic, but investigation. A good shop can read live transmission data, check fluid condition, and identify early-stage problems for far less than they will cost later. Toyota automatics are genuinely robust. The engineering that goes into these units is exceptional, and when properly maintained and correctly used, they are capable of lasting well beyond 200,000 miles without major intervention. But they are not indestructible, and the gap between a transmission that lasts and a transmission that fails is almost always filled by these 10 habits. Fluid condition, correct fluid specification, shift quality awareness, cold weather behavior, temperature discipline when towing, recovery technique, leak detection. These are not complex. They do not require specialized knowledge. They require only the understanding that a transmission is a hydraulic system built to microscopic tolerances, and the habits surrounding it either protect those tolerances or quietly destroy them. The driver with the Camry drove away that afternoon with a fully functional transmission and $4,000 still in his bank account. He called me a week later just to say the car felt better than it had in 2 years. That is what correct fluid and a transmission relearn does. That is what prevention looks like when it works. Before you click away, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a transmission quote that turned out to be something much simpler? Drop it down there. Those stories matter because the most expensive transmission repair is the one that happens because nobody told you what to watch for. And now you know. Subscribe if you want more of this. Real shop knowledge, real causes, real fixes every week. The next video breaks down why Toyota engines develop a specific internal failure pattern that mechanics almost never explain honestly, and what you can do about it before it costs you.